All right, we're going to read chapter 2 of Esther. After these things, when the anger of King Ahasuerus had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decided regarding her. Then the king's attendants who served him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king, and may the king appoint overseers in all the provinces of his kingdom, and have them bring every beautiful young virgin to the citadel of Susa, to the harem, into the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women. And let their cosmetics be given to them. Then let the young woman who pleases the king be queen in place of Vashti." And the suggestion pleased the king, and he did accordingly. There was a Jew at the citadel in Susa whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been taken from Jerusalem with the exiles, who had been deported when Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had deported. He was the guardian to Hadassah, that's Esther, his uncle's daughter, so they were cousins. For she had no father or mother. Now the young woman was beautiful of form and face, and when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So it came about when the command and decree of the king were heard, and many young ladies were gathered to the citadel of Susa into the custody of Haggai, that Esther was taken to the king's palace into the custody of Haggai, who was in charge of the women. Now the young lady pleased him and found favor with him. So he quickly provided her with cosmetics and food, gave her 7 choice female attendants from the king's palace, and transferred her and her attendants to the best place in the harem. Esther did not reveal her people or her kindred, because Mordecai had instructed her that she was not to reveal them. And every day Mordecai walked back and forth in front of the courtyard of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. Now when the turn came for each young woman to go into King Ahasuerus after the end of her 12 months under the regulations for the women, for the days of their beauty treatment were complete as follows: 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with balsam oil and the cosmetics for women. The young woman would go in to the king in this way. Anything that she desired was given her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening she would enter, and in the morning she would return to the second harem, to the custody of Shaashgaz, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. She would not go in to the king again unless the king delighted with her and she was summoned by name. Now when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter, came to go into the king, she did not request anything except what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the women, advised. And Esther was finding favor in the eyes of all who saw her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus in his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month Tebet, in the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all the women, and she found favor and kindness with him more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal turban on her head and made her queen in place of Vashti. Then the king held a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his officials and his servants. He also made a holiday for the provinces and gave gifts in proportion to the king's bounty. Now when the virgins were gathered together for the second time, then Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther still had not revealed her relatives or her people, just as Mordecai had instructed her. For Esther did what Mordecai told her, just as she had when under his care. In those days, while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigtan and Teresh, 2 of the king's officials from those who guarded the door, became angry and sought to attack King Ahasuerus. But the plot became known to Mordecai, and he informed Queen Esther, and Esther told the king in Mordecai's name. Then when the plot was investigated and found to be so, they were both hanged on a wooden gallows, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the king's presence. So we read here in chapter 2 where that wine that the king had been so happy on has gone away. He's sobered up a bit and realized that he is without a queen. So they've set out to remedy that situation. Like I had mentioned before, that there were certain details and things that people did, a custom. We see here with these ladies that that are attending this 12-month process of the king, where so many months are with this particular fragrance, and then so many months are with cosmetics. And I'm thinking to myself, my gosh, what do they have to do for 12 whole months? But nevertheless, that's their situation. We hear, this is where we meet Mordecai and Hadassah, and learn that they are family. She is without parents, but he's raised her as his own. So he has loved her as his own child, and she has respected and loved him as the authoritative figure of their household. He's instructed her specifically not to let it be known that they are Jews. They have come out of captivity, Babylonian captivity. Some of the Jews have gone back to their native homeland, and some have stayed, and these are the ones who remained behind. Now, when I talked about how I could see traits of the Lord throughout this story, right here where it talks about her finding favor with so many, I just see that that's the Lord once again making way for her, and kind of put her off to the side and made sure that she had everything that she needed, the best of everything, and just kind of set her off to the side and get her prepared and ready for the king. Meanwhile, the character trait that Esther has of how she respects Mordecai in that authoritative figure transitions as well with Haggai here. Even though he's just a eunuch and not the king, she still entrusts him on instructing her on which way to go. She's in an unfamiliar setting, and rather than taking something of her own, something about herself to the king, she inquires about the king from Haggai, and then takes that instruction with her, and that is what essentially wins the king over. We wrap up chapter 2 with Mordecai being at the gate, the king's gate. Okay, so where he's sitting, people are coming in and out. There's a lot of traffic, and he's quiet and witnessing. He's basically said he'd been pacing back and forth, just waiting on Esther to get an update on what's going on with her and her situation within the castle. And he overhears this plot against the king. And this just proves that Mordecai has a faithfulness to the king. While he still is Jewish, he knows the king is in charge, and he honors that authority of the king, and wants to protect the king and do what's right. It's then investigated, found to be true, so what he says is true, and these bad guys are hanged on wooden gallows. It's then recorded in the chronicles of the king's presence. Do you have any questions or thoughts about this chapter?